here. We got the gang here. We got a pretty good little crowd.
The gang's all here. I
Let's
see
kick off.
Cody's here.
Oh
Admiral's
yeah.
here.
Oh
Awesome.
yeah.
Welcome, everybody.
Howdy,
Mr.
Mr.
Massa. Hey,
Massa.
hey. Yeah.
Okay, so it's June 14th, 2023 for the weekly community call here at Aladdin DAO. And we're just gonna jump right into it. We'll start off with our first thing on our agenda is Aladdin stuff. And so good news, the snapshot votes passed. I think they passed, gosh, right after our call last week.
I think the end of those votes coincide with like the last minute of the call.
Yeah. And so basically those have the XALD rewards and enabled VE locking of the formats of the ALD token. So it's not enabled yet, but we're still we're putting it into the queue to get those things processed and in place. So your patience is appreciated while we're juggling a couple of other things as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the governance process and the building process are kind of like parallel process, right? One feeds the other, but they're not like it's not a this is a multi-threaded environment here.
So I don't think we have a whole lot more to say on that other than for Aladdin. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I see I was jumping onto the next item, which is the ALD and ETH gauge proposal. And I actually don't know what the latest is on.
That's a good question. I don't know if it's been put up to the curve.
So I know that Tao had made a great draft. I do not know if it is hit the I do not know if it's hit the curve governance system yet. Paul, can you fill me in?
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
For the ALD and ETH gauge proposal, we've got that on the. This may just be like a recall, but I know that Tao had drafted up that ALD and ETH proposal, the gauge proposal for Curve. I don't think it's hit the Curve governance forum yet. Is that correct?
I think he posted it on. That was my understanding.
Well, let's pull a link then to that because we should be pumping.
Have a look now.
Yeah, thank you. We should be pumping that up.
Yeah,
and
that's a big deal.
That. It is a big deal. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Because obviously Aladdin has done several governance, even gauge. Those have gone well, but it's obviously Curve's governance process, and it's VE Curve voters, right? So you need to reach quorum, and you need to have obviously your yes votes passing the threshold. So we do have to do a little bit of legwork to make sure that we remind VE Curve people that we're here and that we're looking for support on this proposal.
Yeah, it's always good to stay active in the Curve community and remind them that you're still around. So.
Well, and then obviously this will be a big one because once we I think this is no surprise getting a gauge for ALD and ETH, but it's definitely like it's one of those sort of critical steps on the path to sort of the integration between Aladdin and Curve that we kind of have been building since the beginning, right? With Concentrator and with Clever. And now that we're bringing the ALD tokenomics sort of into the fold to become first-class citizens. I mean, ALD tokenomics have been neglected for quite some time as we've been focusing all our energy on building up these new products. And so, we have to, now that we're kind of bringing the ALD tokenomics into the sort of the fold of where Aladdin is right now, this is a very important step to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we'll try to get that. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Sorry. Yeah. So having a quick look through the Curve Gov forum, I can't find it there, so I think it wasn't posted.
Not posted yet. Okay. Well, we will make sure that doesn't surprise me because I think we would have been tracking that. So as soon as that goes up, and I don't think that there's any reason that it shouldn't go up soon. So as soon as that goes up, we will start tweeting like mad and try to rally the troops to get this top of mind for VE Curve voters.
Yeah, once we post it, be sure to hop in and voice your support and help answer any questions people raise or whatever. So always good to show that we have a strong community and that folks are interested in Curve governance. So we'll keep you posted. All right. moving on. So I guess we'll just jump right into FX then. And
Yeah.
so
Do
Go
you
ahead,
want
Kruger.
to? I was going to suggest that we shuffle the order a little bit. We've got just a couple of like basic things to get out of the way for Concentrator and Clever.
Yeah.
Why don't we check those off, and then we can have a little bit of a longer conversation around FX. FOFX.
That sounds
Damn it.
yeah,
Awesome.
sounds good to me.
Broke my own rule.
Uh,
Okay, so go ahead, please.
No, so like for Concentrator, not a whole lot other than just we're going to have an upcoming governance proposal to basically change the AFXS vault structure, basically the underlying asset to go to single staked CVX FXS, and we talked about that a little bit last week. But it's still top of mind that'll be coming up, and so we'll have to. I believe will that have to have an audit for that?
Yeah,
vault
there'll
structure
be
change?
at at the very least. I mean, Charlene can speak to this if she likes, but I believe there will need to be at least a sign off on the delta, the changes between the old vault structure and the new one. I think that it won't be like a full audit process since it's just a tweak to the existing contract, but definitely it needs to go through the auditor before it goes live, as with everything that Aladdin does.
Yeah. So that'll be a bit of a process, but just letting everyone know that that's in the background and that's going on.
Yeah, and it's good to know because you'll see that the AFXS yield is not really great right now compared to what you can get on single staking, right? And so it was actually I think it was it C2TP or it was somebody at Convex that reached out to us in the first place to kind of point this out. When we feel staking FX available, they hadn't actually launched it yet, and so the LP was the only option at that point. But with single staking now available and with it having a higher yield, it makes a lot more sense to back it because in analogous to that this would be a proposal to make AFXS backed by single staked CVX FXS. So watch out for that in the future. Good to just kind of like mention these things, even like we'll mention them each week until it's live, just to sort of keep them on people's radar.
Yeah. So that's all I had for Concentrator. And then moving on to Clever, we had our round 46 complete for the harvest round. So.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's true, and it was a relatively big one this week. And again, every time we talk about it, and I say we're not going to talk about it in the future, but then we do talk about it in the future. There was a pretty good yield for Clever farmers, and the reason I am bringing it up now is because there's a handful of CVX in the exit queue at any given time. So you'll know that when you use Clever, you have to, you deposit CVX into Clever, and then Clever has to vote lock that on your behalf with Convex, right? And the Convex vote locking cycle is 16 weeks. So what happens is when you want your CVX back, you have to wait for your underlying CVX to become unlocked, right? Mm-hmm. You can request a withdrawal at any given time, and as soon as you request the withdrawal, the way the contract works is that you lose your claim on the yield. Like you lose your claim on the bribe rewards as soon as you've requested a withdrawal, but it may take some time before the withdrawal is you're able to actually claim it, right? Depending on that underlying lock with Convex. And so having a handful of CVX in the exit queue actually ends up sort of boosting a little bit the yields of everything across the board. It's a little bit analogous to like if you had tokens locked in a liquidity pool that weren't earning, that it kind of boosts the yield on everybody else's. So a little bit of a similar dynamic there. I will take this moment to sort of recommend to people in terms of Clever and CVX, it's not generally a good idea to request a withdrawal of your CVX long in advance of its unlock. Obviously by doing that, you make sure that it unlocks when it comes around. You don't have to remember anything, but the closer that you can, the later you can wait before your underlying CVX unlocks, the better for you, right? So that's just something to keep in mind. And when you hit withdraw on the Clever page, you can see a schedule of your unlocks. So
yeah, so important money management tips there. So not financial advice, but just
it just never is. It just never is it?
I tell you what, if you wanna lose money, I recommend you listen to some of the financial advice I have to give you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. My record of like buying something hours before a significant drop in its price remains intact. I'm happy to say. When I like made the smallest little like transaction, I don't know, a week ago that was like right before like a 5% drop. So I was pretty happy to see that nature is healing, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I did all the folks that purchase Llama NFTs a favor by not purchasing one, so that the price hasn't dropped by 90%. So you're welcome, everyone. So
Uh,
so there's that. And then with Clever, we've got a new booster round that'll be starting here, and I think we're going to be
yes.
right after this call or shortly thereafter, sometime today, we'll be
Posting
posting
list.
the list of Clever boosters, and so we've been watching folks and monitoring everybody's content that they've been producing, and so we've kind of have switched to every other month schedule, but it's still the equivalent distribution schedule is dictated by the original
The emissions.
tokenomics.
Yeah, exactly. So basically we do a double round every 2 months instead of a single round every 1 month.
Yeah, and
And
so
that makes a lot
go
more
ahead.
sense.
Well, it's easier for the team to manage and for everyone to sort of pay attention and for folks to kind of have opportunities to generate content as well. I mean, sometimes as
Yeah.
you've seen on the calls, sometimes it's like, well, Clever's just still being clever, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, exactly.
not
Well,
other than just the normal stuff.
Well, and one of the things that I also worry about a little bit, because I'm a worrier, that's why my friends call me Whiskers, that I worry a little bit about is just like governance exhaustion as well. We're asking VE Clev token holders to vote on these booster emissions. And if this is like, if it's if it's a small number of weeks and it's a comeback, we need more voting and more voting and more voting. I worry a little bit about that kind of like governance exhaustion and like people kind of losing interest in ALD and XALD token holder and sort of doing a good job of divvying that emission up to the people who've actually earned it and provided that program depends very much on token holders voting in alignment with what they see. Sick of it and they just stop showing up, then it kind of damages the quality of the program.
Yeah, it's for the community, it's for everybody to engaged and active, and we are the intent of it is basically to encourage people to talk about these products, and so we need to keep encouraging that, and so yeah, we got to keep showing up.
Yeah, fair enough. It sounds like Admiral's on my wavelength, just in terms of not like haranguing voters too much and too frequently for this, because if they kind of get bored of it, then the fewer people voting, the more likely you have a situation where like one person shows up and like votes overwhelmingly for a single booster, for example, and then if there's just not like a quorum of other people showing up to register sort of vote for their preferred boosters, and you end up concentrating all the rewards on just one person's idea of the best booster kind of thing, right? So
yeah, that's kind of like the worst case scenario of the whole thing. So
I mean, unless that booster is me, in which case it's kind of the best case scenario. So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, you're a pretty good booster. You're a pretty good booster. I'll give you a vote. I'll give you a vote. All right. And that's basically Clever and Concentrator. So I guess we can move on to FX.
Yeah. Boy, and it's been a big week or two for FFX, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of sort of the meat of the life cycle of Aladdin right now, and so we've got the beta testing ongoing on Sepolia testnet, and
yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So we launched the protocol on Sepolia, and so that people could get a chance to take a look at the UX and have a look at sort of the process. And we've had a huge uptake on people kicking the tires on this thing on Sepolia. Charlene, you were having a look. You were monitoring the transactions coming through there. What did you see?
over 1,300 transactions so far.
Is that right?
That-
That is excellent. That's really good news. So yeah, we appreciate that a lot. Folks kicking the tires on that, and it looks like all of the people who use their fake ETH to mint fakes XETH, looks like they're down. Looks like they're down 11 fake cents from their $1 that they started at. So better luck, but that having been said, if you're looking to get some big fake yields and you think that fake ETH might pump, then now's a great time to buy fake XETH on Sepolia.
It's all fake internet money, isn't it? It's all make
Well,
believe.
this is faker than most, isn't it?
It's fake to us.
It's a simulation of a simulation.
Yeah, it's not real to me, damn it.
Oh yeah, it's everybody's ready to get on board the fake XETH train, and it's going to the moon.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm looking here at FETH, and we've had, I guess since we've launched Sepolia, ETH price is down like 5%, and so FETH is sitting at 99.9954.
Oh, 0.9,
yeah.
yes, 0.995. Yeah,
it's doing what we're saying it was supposed to do, which is
that's right,
kind of holding its value. Yeah,
pretty much what it says on the tin. Down, ETH goes down, 5-ish%, and FETH goes down 0.5-ish%. So a factor of 10 smaller, and then of course XETH is down at 89 fake cents. So
yeah.
So there. Anyway, really good. The collateral ratio. I mean, not that we can learn anything about the dynamics of how this works once it's no longer fake. But the collateral ratio, as people have minted and redeemed, has varied around. As you see, it's 172 right now on Sepolia. So anyway, just thought it would be good to sort of highlight that and chat about that a little bit. It looks good so far. We've had some great feedback, but I want to highlight we did put together a Google form that if you have any kind of feedback on how it looks or how it's behaving, please do jump onto that Google form, and we can drop a link into the chat here for those of you who are online. But yeah, please do ping us with your thoughts about that. And it's going to be ongoing. So now, in the beginning, we talked a little bit about. So we talked about a timeline a little bit in the beginning, and the initial idea was that we would run 2 weeks on Sepolia on testnet, and then we would run 2 weeks on mainnet, and that's still a potential option here. But one of the things that the team has been doing, obviously, we've been diligently gathering feedback, and a lot of feedback, like a lot of people around the crypto world are kind of asking, they're kind of poking at this pure ETH question, like why are we not involving liquid staking derivatives instead of just ETH? And so we've heard that from a few different places. Obviously, part of the story initially when we put the initial proof of concept together, part of the story was, well, let's just keep it simple with pure ETH, and that also front runs any questions of decentralization, right? Because we are as decentralized as ETH, and that is sort of pretty darn good. But there's been a lot of sort of a lot of questions and a bit of sort of asking, like, why are we not leveraging the sort of the quote unquote risk-free rate of ETH here? And so we've been talking about that internally. We've been having some pretty fierce internal Aladdin debates on how we would incorporate LSDs on the back end. How we would incorporate them as, allow people to use them to mint FETH and XETH, and how we would manage the yield that they produce in the Treasury reserve. So this is something that is kind of an ongoing question for us. We want to get some feedback from the community and get some sense of what you guys think. But we've actually got a potential revision in mind that we can roll out either like completely later as a V2 to FFX, or that we can incorporate now while we're still in the beta stage. And the idea there is to potentially, and again, this is all very early stuff, and so we're kind of bringing our community along for the ride here with some pretty early internal discussions. but potentially to be looking at using yields from the liquid staking derivatives to fund any possible liquidations. So, for example, right now under the liquidation model of f of x, what happens is if the protocol ever gets to the point where there is too much fETH minted and not enough xETH, as the collateral ratio falls below 130%, then there are incentives that are paid to xETH minters and fETH redeemers that come from the NAV of fETH. So basically, as an fETH holder, if the protocol becomes not collateralized enough, you will see a small hit to your NAV, which is basically a stability fee, right? And that stability fee is paid not to the protocol, but to the users who come and restabilize, right? Basically push that collateralization ratio back up. But there are a few weaknesses that potentially are floating around with that model that can be corrected by changing to a dedicated liquidation, like a stability pool. And so basically we could create a stability pool similar to the way that Liquity does it. And within that stability pool, we can use those LSD yields to pay yields into that stability pool. And the stability pool would provide us a ready pool of fETH that we can use to redeem to push that collateralization ratio back up. And then for people who are farming in that stability pool, you're looking at being able to earn a pretty great yield that's going to come in the form of ETH and staked ETH or something along those lines. So
yeah, just for clarity, it's not a stability. It doesn't function like the stability pool in Liquity, where that's basically for price stabilization. This is just for liquidations. So
that is the Liquity stability pool is for liquidations. You're unless you and I do we have our wires crossed on the nomenclature? Because there is a stability pool for liquidations that is it's a pool of LUSD that is used to liquidate loans when they become because obviously Liquity is based on individual troves, right? And so that there's a ready pool of LUSD that is used to it's used to make those liquidations.
Yes,
so
and that's
it's the same.
Yes,
should be the
and that's
same as that.
Correct. Yeah, and that's what this pool. I mean, that's what it's designed to do is basically act as we're still working through the mechanics of it, and in terms of like what the the version of it would be as it would be in the wild or whatever. But these are just sort of the general outlines of how the what we're sort of looking at, and I think the main argument obviously in favor of it is you do get that risk-free rate from yield. You get that a system that basically can go ahead.
The protocol, just to be clear, the protocol gets that, and then it uses that to incentivize people who deposit in this liquidation pool, in this stability pool.
Right. Yes, and so the argument for it is basically it offers a way to make the protocol safer. It doesn't rely on outside sources for that liquidation of fETH.
That's right. There's two key strengths in my view. You're right about that. Like right now, the current model for liquidation of fETH requires it involves a market buy of fETH that is then used to redeem. And so basically, but you're relying on the liquidity available on a secondary market in that case for the liquidation mechanism. In this case, we would actually maintain the liquidity in the stability pool as part of the protocol, ready to go to restabilize or basically to push that collateralization ratio up on a moment's notice without needing to go to external liquidity and pay whatever the slippage happens to be at the time, right? That was always a risk, is that if there was high slippage for that fETH purchase cycle, if we ever needed to get into a protocol stability mode, or I forget what we called it in the white paper, but if we get into the protocol rebalance mode, then we were going to this external AMM, but that you're then subject to the vagaries of that AMM, which is slippage and which is related to how much liquidity is available. So by maintaining the pool internally, it kind of cuts that risk out. The other thing, and I think this is a big one, is the FETH stability fees, should they ever be required, are no longer charged to just regular FETH holders, right? So FETH holders no longer have that risk of paying a small, like it was always a small amount, since the only time that you get into a situation where stability fees are required is if there's a ton of FETH minted, right? There's a lot of FETH minted, there's not enough XETH. So, a very small NAV adjustment would have been sufficient, but there's always just that sort of the principle of the thing, which is that if you're holding FETH as a stable, you to not have that risk of even a small fee applied is, I think it's appropriate. I think it's good. And to cover that with yields on the back end, basically by basically changing that liquidation model, by using those yields to fund this stability pool, it strengthens the FETH story, and it strengthens the overall protocol safety with the liquidations.
Yeah,
in my view.
Yeah, no, I think those are like really good points to bring up, because I think anyone that's holding FETH, this sort of like, it's sort of a peace of mind factor in terms of like, okay, well, the as you were talking about sort of the stability fee, okay, well, so like the NAV of it will only be dependent upon the price of ETH now at this point, and then additionally the stability pool will basically, you don't have to be monitoring, sort of the collateralization ratio to sort of like, hold FETH. And so
yeah, and I mean, the hope always, even with the existing mechanism, is that any adjustments that are required are going to be so small that it really doesn't matter. Or keeping in mind that the price of FETH is not pegged to anything, right? It's still floating over small amount. Case to say that, as the community sort of nudged us to think about LSDs and how we should potentially incorporate them, that I think this is a very good, like a very powerful way to leverage them to improve the whole protocol. And then obviously that would also, what we would probably do is we would divide any yields from the full LSD reserve between depositors in this liquidation pool, the stability pool, whatever we're going to call it, and FX holders, obviously. And so that ends up being, sorry, not FX holders, VE FX holders, so lockers, right, as usual. So basically that forms a revenue stream for the protocol, and probably what we would do in that case is we would revisit the minting and redeeming fees, and just make sure that there's minimum friction required to mint and redeem FETH and XETH, which obviously that determines how well the protocol functions, and to make the protocol overall economically viable, you can kind of think about that as the difference between a management, like an asset management fee, where the protocol earns some portion of what the reserve is earning on the LSD yields, versus this like service charge fee, where the protocol's earnings are based entirely around the minting and redemption of these tokens.
Yeah, it definitely sort of changes the dynamics of revenue for the product, which in a good way, and so hopefully makes things, from a user experience, wouldn't be much different than kind of what you're experiencing now. But obviously, before we would roll this out, I think we probably like prolong the test net, so that make sure that everyone understood what's going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there would be, so as Charlene just kind of stealthily announced in the chat, we actually got the initial major audit back on FFX today, and so we are, FFX itself is in a place where if we deploy that, like the initial concept, we are fully audited and ready to go there, and so, but if we look at making this change, there would be there would be a little bit of technical work and a second audit, obviously a shorter cycle on that audit, since it's just a delta, like a small change to the previous one. But it would definitely push the timeline back a little bit. So we're really keen to hear back from everybody on the line here today, and asking around, talking in the community in the Discord about what people think of the idea of incorporating these improvements before we make our mainnet launch. The team has been kind of thinking about it, and we'll kind of let you know. I think we're still sort of hashing out, deciding back and forth. We're talking about the details right now of how exactly the best way to implement this would go. Because then there would also be a question of like, if we're going to accept LSDs, there's a little additional bit of complexity involved in how do we determine the makeup of the reserve fund, right? So in the initial model, there's nothing to decide; it's all ETH, right? But if we're looking at leveraging LSDs in the reserve, then the question is, which ones are we going to accept? How are we going to control the total treasury exposure to each one of those LSDs? Should it be entirely LSDs or a mixture of pure ETH and LSD? So there's some questions to be asked there, and there's knock-on implications there as well, where if the treasury is no longer just simple pure ETH, we would need to make a couple of technical tweaks to especially this idea of the stability pool and the revenue sharing, where rather than sharing pure ETH, which is the reserve token, we would have to share maybe like a wrapper token that would wrap all of the, like, whatever different LSDs are in the treasury would need to be wrapped up in a single token to make sort of the stability redemptions, VE profit, revenue sharing, and even minting and redeeming FFX would all need to be done through this sort of wrapper token. But for minting and redeeming, we've just talked about it today, and we can do that in a way that's like completely transparent. You don't, you would still in principle show up to the website and you could still mint and redeem to pure ETH or these LSDs individually, even though behind the scenes there'd be a ZAP involved, right? You'd have to go through this sort of wrapper token in the case where we're accepting multiple different tokens into the treasury reserve. So, but as I said, really definitely keen to hear people's thoughts on whether or not they like the idea of incorporating this improvement. I mean, it is a trade-off. We also want to be clear here that, like, you can see in the original white paper, there's a strong argument for pure ETH being like a decentralization maxi choice, right? There is no question about its there's no question about its decentralization, and there's no additional smart contract risk to just our own. By changing backing and adding in these one or more LSDs in some kind of a mix or whatever, we're definitely adding an extra layer of risk in the reserve side, right? I think that you can make the argument that it's a good trade-off, adding a little extra risk on the reserve for this like pretty solid, that, as we just outlined, improvements to the way the protocol functions. But definitely, it's not a for free improvement.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like the key issue from just keeping us from just going for it straightforward, is just making sure that we've made this very strong argument against sort of like exposure to centralized forces, and with this change, the centralization is endogenous to the Ethereum ecosystem, and not the original motivation for FX protocol was because of the banking system, the effects of the banking system, which is
that's right,
outside of the Ethereum ecosystem. And so while you would, if you were to take, Lido or Frax or whoever, and use their LSD, of course you'd be taking on some level of centralization, but it would be endogenous to the Ethereum ecosystem. And so, there would be a lot of like careful considerations as to like which ones would be incorporated into FX to ensure that, hey, we are making selecting a protocol that has incentivized liquidity on chain and is battle tested, and has lots of other use cases as well. So it's not a decision that we're like taking lightly.
Yeah, and I think you kind of touched on the key thing. One of the things we've been talking about internally as a team is like, we write this white paper for FFX, and it's all about battling centralized risk of stable coins. But then the question is it just all centralized risk that we're mainly trying to push back against here, or is it like real world asset based centralized risk? And so, I would expect everybody, all the users and everyone on the call, probably has their own unique perspective on that, right? Whether or not they whether or not they would lump because there's no doubt that there are centralization risks associated with Lido and like Frax ETH. Like pretty much every single liquid staking derivative introduces, in addition to smart contract risk, some amount of centralized risk, but depending on how the individual LSD operates, right? But is that whole bucket of that whole bucket of crypto world risk, that's kind of separate from like the real world asset backing risk of like, you know, obviously you've got like some kind of like you'll have like legislation or like regulation issues that could come up and quickly change like a huge part of the backing of your favorite, you know, centralized stablecoin. And so I think that, you know, you can make the argument that FFX is for avoiding real world asset risk, or you can make the argument that FFX is for avoiding every kind of centralized risk, and that's going to drive your opinion on whether or not you like LSDs on the back end. But certainly from a technical perspective, the risk of the LSD aside, the protocol is just much stronger when it has, you know, when it's earning yield on its reserve, obviously, like for obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you know, it's the risk-free risk-free yield.
Risk-free, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, it's
scare quotes as applied as necessary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you know, it's just it's sort of it's kind of a, you know, once you throw that into the equation, you're kind of like turbocharging sort of anything, and so, or at least making it operate more smoothly, and not having to rely on exogenous sources of revenue. So
yeah, and I mean it's also one of those things where, you know, the protocol or protocols that are able to do what we're trying to do in a sustainable long-term way are going to need to be themselves sustainable, right? And so you know, you can make the argument that if the way that this type of thing works is by leveraging that Ethereum, you know, staking reward to make the whole thing economically viable, so that it is actually there with deep liquidity and works the way it's supposed to for everybody, then, you know, you can make the argument that it's better to get there now and to make sure that the system works, you know, sort of sooner than later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so give us your feedback. We want to know kind of what people are thinking about that, what their perception of the, you know, centralized risk of LSDs are versus, you know, sort of the benefits of it. And so you know, we've been discussing it for a little while now, and you know, you're starting to see other stablecoin products as well start to incorporate them. So it's sort of the industry as a whole is sort of trying to make this decision, and so
yeah. And I think what's nice about FFX is that like nobody is doing what we're doing in terms of this one big collective CDP model, right? Mm-hmm. That we are sort of putting together here. And you know, we talked a little bit about the liquidity, liquidation pool, like the stability pool, whatever that we're calling it, where it's that ready pile of LUSD that's there to do liquidations in order to earn. You know, like you by depositing in that pool, anytime a liquidation is run through the pool, you know, basically you are paying a little bit of LUSD to get the ETH collateral back of the trove that was liquidated. And so it's kind of like a nice way to automatically buy ETH at a low price. You know, whenever the price drops, then you automatically buy a little bit. That's nice. And then you obviously earn all of the liquidation incentives as well, or a share of the liquidation incentives as you are in a share of that pool. And the neat thing about the way FFX is kind of built as this one big CDP is that we're sort of, there's like, the liquidation isn't like, we don't liquidate everything all at once, right? Like we just redeem only enough to sort of nudge that collateralization ratio back above the 130, back above where it needs to be. And you know, but it underlying it performs the same kind of it basically does the same thing though, is you're basically providing FETH in the stability pool, and that FETH is ready to be redeemed for ETH whenever that collateralization ratio sort of falls too far, and then you also earn all of those basically you earn all of the you earn whatever the liquidation incentive is, but then you also are able to earn whatever the under this model you're able to earn those LSD yields, right? Like a share of the yields.
Yeah, I think for FETH holders, it's pretty beneficial in terms of opportunities to earn on holding it. Basically, just because not only will you have like the liquidity pools that we'll have on Curve, but you'll have the choice between that or the liquidity pool like right out of the gate. And so
there's because it's an FETH pool. The people who are farming that pool, and obviously like the amount you earn in that pool is going to be dependent on how many people are farming it, just like just about every pool ever, right? So like we're focusing down some fraction of the LSD yields from the entire reserve down just onto the people who are farming that pool. And so the more people who are in the pool, the more that's spread out, and the more it's concentrated. But what's interesting here is that oh shoot. Sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought. K-Mats, take over.
Yeah, so the more people that are in the liquidity pool, the more diluted the yield gets. But at the same time, those are people that are not in the Curve LP as well. So
and not only that, but they're also minted. Thank you very much for helping me bridge my brain explosion. The point I was trying to get at is that having a place to farm pure FETH helps to answer the question as well. Like some of the other feedback we've been getting from people in the wild, and it's funny because it's kind of like 50-50 which side of this you take, but a lot of people will say like, okay, I understand why you would want to hold XETH because that's amazing. Like it's leverage ETH and you don't pay a funding rate. Like that's incredible. We don't have that. We get a lot of really positive feedback like that. And then those people will say like, but who's going to hold FETH, right? Like who's going to ever want to hold fractional ETH when they can hold XETH? And so obviously if that person's mindset was copy pasted to the entire crypto world, you wouldn't have people who wanted to hold FETH, and then the leverage of XETH wouldn't be very big because obviously FETH holders are what create the leverage effect in the XETH holders, right? They're the ones who are giving up their volatility to XETH people. So by having this, compared to V1, like compared to the currently operating on testnet version of FFX, having this liquidity pool for FETH ensures that FETH is minted there to farm it, right? And so it basically increases the baseline amount of FETH that is minted and helps to guarantee that XETH is getting the leverage that they're kind of looking for, right? Every FETH that's minted and just kind of doing something is FETH that's creating leverage for the XETH people.
Yeah, it basically just helps the protocol function in a positive way.
Well, and let's not forget that that's not like token inflation yield, right? Like that is hashtag real yield. It's yield denominated in an ETH or a wrapper of ETH in this case, and it's it's paid out not from the treasury's coffers, but it's paid out from sort of like the revenue that's coming in from LSD state, like from earning those LSD yields on the reserve.
Yeah. The design makes sense. It's mostly just a matter of sort of your comfort level on sort of the trade-offs involved, and like we said, we've been thinking about it a lot. We've been going through it a lot, and we just kind of want people's feedback now.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the team is going to have a pretty strong opinion when we finally converge on one. Now's the time when we want to hear back from the community about their thoughts and what you guys all think.
Yeah.
So can I give some feedback about this point?
Yeah,
so
please.
I also summarized my idea about kind of proof strategy of the FX protocol that I mentioned in my video there. So currently, I probably have mainly two directions about proof strategy. One is about, as Kruger said, as I also summarized my idea in my video, that we're going to accept all the major LSD protocols, those synthetic asset ETH tokens. Then we're going to build those pool pair for each, such as SPEs, FEs, or SPEs, XEs, or something. Frax Finance, and then Rocket or something. Then that I really love that product positioning because we are very neutral for the entire ecosystem growth or LSD market in Israel. I love that positioning because it's kind of very hot market right now. The big white space.
But let me ask you this, Mr. Masa.
Yeah.
Each one of those LSDs brings a different risk, and anybody who holds FETH or XETH has to take the risk of all tokens in the reserve. If we allowed every LSD token as a reserve token, wouldn't that quickly become overly risky?
I see. That makes sense. But what kind of risk we have to prepare for that? We're gonna accept the LSD tokens, but we can have Oracle manipulation risk for each LSD pair against each token, right? Because it's
for example, any LSD that has low liquidity is a very large risk.
Yeah, that's very large risk. Sure, you're right. So in that case, you still think we're gonna try to make the biggest default between FE token or XE token with ETH token, the original ETH token. That's your primary thinking about. I see. Okay. Then,
for example, one of the things we've talked about internally is because obviously we're talking about if we're going to accept LSDs in the reserve. First of all, for prudence, do we need to limit how many? We don't want somebody to be able to come in and manipulate the reserves of f of x by depositing a whole bunch of one type and withdrawing a whole bunch of a different type, right? So we might want to, so what we might want to do, what we've been talking about doing, is a fixed allocation decided at the protocol level, by community governance or some other process that would take into account we would only onboard an LSD once it had a certain level of liquidity, and we would limit the total treasury exposure to that individual LSD based on some idea of its risk.
I think it's a healthy approach. Yeah, we can use the downboarding process to decide about each pool allocations.
Yeah, potentially something in there. The main thing from my personal perspective, the main thing is we just want to make sure that for FETH and XETH holders, there's never we don't want the main tokens of the protocol, FETH and XETH, to have those holders to have concerns about what the reserve is, right? We want it to just be okay, it's ETH or an ETH equivalent without having to worry about the individual risks of a particular LSD as much as possible. Obviously, something like the front runner in our internal conversations is obviously Lido because of its incredible liquidity, right? When you have super deep liquidity on chain, that kind of forms a buffer for the reserve that we can very quickly.
Yes, that makes sense. I totally agree with that point. Then, once we get to see other, LSD protocol growing up, like Frax Finance, let's say 2 billion, 3 billion, TVL, we could gradually think about the add those items into the pool too. That's perfectly makes sense. I like that approach.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we're not, I take your point very well here. We don't want to tie ourselves, I think, to one specific LS. We're not trying to pick a winner. But we definitely want to have some some threshold of liquidity and nominal decentralization before we start onboarding those into the reserve. I think that's just my personal call.
No, I agree. Yeah,
sure. Then based on that approach, also another new concern or new issue we have to do is how we gonna attract those LSD player into a pool. So, especially long term, because
why do we need to?
The point is, for example, Lido Finance, Lido. So I think they also want to build their own pool, and they want to grow their pool on their own, SD East pool. Then, how are we gonna make the benefits for those, major LSD East player, make business together with us.
Yeah, I see what
There-
you
we
mean.
don't-
Yeah, how can we leverage their own spending on liquidity, you mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
how can we basically hook our well and that's another good question, and when we start talking about having LSDs in the back end, suddenly there are actually players that we can start talking to as a partnership. Like if accepting staked ETH, for example, from Lido is a if Lido were to ever consider that a helpful thing to them, such that they would support us in some way, maybe on liquidity, maybe one of the things that we've often talked about in terms of like partnerships with other DAOs and organizations is what about as a something a partner could do that's sort of beneficial for everyone is just basically like using F of X, right? Like devoting some portion of their treasury holdings to like FETH, for example, right? And holding that FETH, and like a large player doesn't need to devote a ton in order to help. That helps liquidity quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Something like kind of carb war on FX, but I think probably we have to think about those approaches too. Yeah, so that's what.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Like as soon as we're talking specific LSDs, now you're talking about specific organizations that may be able to bring some like that partnerships may be able to strengthen us, especially during the bootstrapping phase. Because the first thing that I think of when I hear like partnerships, the first thing I think of is like, in principle, we don't need them, right? The protocol stands on its own. It does, like, we can accept your LSD or not without having the opinion of that like LSD's organization or the DAO or whatever. Like we don't need them on our team in order for this thing to work. That's my kind of like my like combative first response. But then
It's
obviously,
risk management. I like that.
but obviously
risk
like
management.
yes, risk management, and also like the bootstrapping phase of F of X. This is a place where definitely like obviously like the protocol you can kind of imagine and you can see how it's like it's very resilient and very powerful the bigger that it gets. As with everything, it's the bootstrapping phase that is the kind of the dicey part, right? It's the part where you have to be a little bit more careful and you have to sort of plan your moves a little more carefully. So these partnerships are really helpful at that point, as you say.
Then so this protocol, the beauty of this protocol, FS protocol, is actually it's not a cold start, as you said, because once you want to manage your price volatility with each token, they can stake it. So that's pretty beautiful. But I'm thinking about like more like like a 0 to 1 model, like it's not about the 0 to 1, but I'm talking more like 1 to 10 or 10 to 100. In that case, I think we need the very strong partnership with LSD player. Especially what we want to attract the ideal scenario is like, those like a long-term ETH holder, they're going to stake their token to, those LSD player, then they're going to allocate those LSD tokens into a platform. Then they're not going to sell their, those tokens like if ETH holder. To me, that's it's pretty much an ideal scenario to scale this.
Well, it is, but
protocol.
there's one like we should clarify though, like part of the story here, because the CDP, like the F of X CDP consists of, you've got the reserve, you've got the borrowed amount, which is like the FETH, and then you've got the rest, which is the XETH. If you are minting this token with your LSD, if you're holding XETH or FETH not in the stability pool, you're not gaining those LSD yields, right? So minting with the LSD doesn't convey any benefit to the person who, like, if you mint XETH, you have the same XETH as everyone else, right? And the yields from whatever you use to mint your XETH are used to pay the stability fees, which is good for everybody, but it's not direct yield for you as that XETH holder, right? As compared to like an individual CDP model, where you might expect that like you continue personally to own the collateral in your CDP, right? And so if the collateral is earning yield, then that's your yield. It's different for F of X because collateral of whatever, the yield of whatever collateral is provided is used to strengthen the overall protocol through the stability pool, and also that's how the protocol then earns its money. So the benefit to the individual fETH or xETH holder, it doesn't matter which token, like which ETH variant or even pure ETH you use to mint, right? You still get the same fETH or xETH back. If you want to earn the staking yields from the reserve, then you should mint fETH and deposit it in that stability pool where we pay those yields out. But in general, if you're like an xETH degen and you're looking to take a leverage position over a long period, you're not gaining anything from minting with an LSD.
Yeah, true. Then based on those understanding, what about the new idea that FS protocol itself would be POS validator for the ETH? What do you think?
Well, the problem with that is liquidity, right? That you don't right now we can have with either pure ETH or with an LSD, we always can liquidate to pure ETH down to the very last fETH and xETH. Right? There's no delay, right? But as soon as we're a validator, now there's a variable delay, and, right? And so now you can't always redeem your F and X ETH. Now there might be ways, like in the long term future, if you can imagine a giant treasury reserve, then you can kind of imagine. Yeah, exactly. Like where you can say like where you can start to play this fractional, like semi-fractional reserve game a little bit, where you say, okay, well, we're gonna, now that we've got $1 trillion in the reserve, we're gonna, we feel comfortable, using 10% to do like our own validation, because we have a big enough buffer to to process withdrawals or to process redemptions in a liquid form. But I think in the beginning, I don't think that's as likely, but it's definitely on our. I think it's on our radar, definitely for like medium to long term.
I see. Yeah, you're right.
But
I agree with you.
And it's a whole different, like. But the other thing to consider is like it's a whole different ball of wax, right? Running a validator, like it's not that we can't do it, but it's definitely like it's its own business, basically, right? Running validators and keeping them sort of up and running and not slashed.
Yeah, it's totally different. There's also a time component. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, listen, Mr. Masa, always appreciate all the thoughtful like comments and feedback. We're paying attention to what you're saying, and we're all working together here. It's really very cool.
Thanks. Yeah, but let's do the scalable bootstrap program in the beginning. Yeah, let's do it the way. I love that. I love the initial approach. It's not a cold start. I like that. It's pretty important for the tech startup. So.
Yeah, exactly right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. We are pushing our hour mark here. Is there any other comments or anything everybody wants to bring in before we get to the grand finale and the fireworks show at the end of the at the end of the call?
Yeah, so if anybody doesn't have anything right now, just please feel free to reach out on Discord or DM us, or hit us up however you want to give us feedback, because the more info we have, the better.
Yeah, exactly. And that, by the way, that includes tag us on our Discord, even if you prefer to provide your feedback privately. Tag us in the main Discord, and then we'll get a friend request going and get you into DMs. And if you want to sort of talk privately about your concerns one way or the other about that, you don't necessarily need to do it in all the way in public as well.
Yeah.
Or you could do like Mr. Masa and make these like amazing, long, incredible videos there with your thoughts, and we can have the whole discussion on on YouTube like boosters.
Yeah,
well, just like a back and forth YouTube sort of volley across the net sort of a thing.
Yeah, exactly right.
Sure, we can do it. Of course, we can do it on the channel. Of course, yes, that's my project too.
Oh, great. Okay.
Right.
So having said all that, I guess we move on to the last leg.
The ever lovely and vivacious Charlene.
The firework? There's
That's
no
right.
firework.
The fireworks.
I
Maybe
just want
that's
to
for the best.
actually, I want to add a little bit to Kruger's comments on the liquidation process. So for most of the liquidators, participate in DeFi liquidations, right? People sort of assume, right, to liquidate to ETH at the moment. But as LSD assets are becoming increasingly popular and more liquid, I think we're probably going to see sometime one of the LSD assets will probably have better liquidity than ETH itself, right? And so, the winning LSD, it does offer additional layer of smart contract risk, but it will probably become systematic risk for Ethereum as well. So as Kruger and Kemet pointed out, we understand there's additional risk we're taking on for this trade-off decision, but we're still working on it. And if we do go down this approach, we'll make sure we pick the LSD asset with most battle tested, and there's definitely zero RWA risk for FX protocol.
Yeah,
and
I was just going to follow up on the thing that you said just now. Kemet's made the same point to me earlier, where he's kind of said, like, already now, staked ETH risk is kind of Ethereum risk because of how much Ethereum they have locked.
Yeah.
Like if staked ETH had some massive like catastrophe, it would be damaging to all of us, whether we hold staked ETH or not. And so in a way, we're not avoiding that risk by avoiding taking, for like in the example of staked ETH, which is so big, like we're not really avoiding the risk by not taking the token.
Yeah. So, but if we do make this trade-off, right, that means this is going to make the protocol a lot more stronger economically, right? And we're going to use most of that economics earned, right, to actually to make the protocol safer in return. So where the risk is taken and where the yield is earned, right, and that will be compensated back to the protocol safety. And to close that loop.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's such a stronger, ignoring the additional risk of changing the reserve, like ignoring that side, it is just better in every way to have that yield than to not, obviously, right? Because we can use it in such a strong, like such a way, like and it's not just like, oh, suddenly the protocol earns more. This change that we're floating fundamentally changes the liquidation mechanism and for the better. I think I can't imagine anybody arguing it's not for the better. No longer exposed to the risk of an external AMM, and having that like ready liquidity pool, so we know that we have the token availability, to make that, and then also taking away the stability charges from FETH is in my opinion is huge. Like making that no longer a possibility.
Yeah, I think the arguments against it are mostly just sort of ideological. I would say for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, you could there could be I would say I agree with you 90%, assuming that we do a good job, like Charlene says, of making sure to only consider the like strongest LSD players.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right, Charlene.
All right. Firework time, but there's no firework. Sorry, guys. We have all seen the inflation data came out yesterday. So both inflation and core inflation for May actually, have come down a little bit. That provides good justification for no need to raise rate at today's meeting happening in a few hours, I think 2 p.m. EST. The market actually expects the Fed to raise rate again after Treasury tops up its account by selling $500 billion bonds. So good coordination within the system. This week is actually a super week, right? As we not only have Fed meeting today, we also have Bank of Japan's meeting tomorrow and European Central Bank meeting tomorrow as well. The game now is pretty much whoever starts easing first will lose it all. So compared to the movement on the denominator side, we are actually more interested on what's happening on the numerators. There are some interesting discrepancies on the economic data. The US GDP data and the GDI data. So we all know GDP, right? That measures economic output through spending. And GDI is just gross domestic income, right? That actually measures economic output on the income side. So every dollar spent in the economy should be income for someone else, right? So GDP should just equal to GDI in theory. And there could be some statistical discrepancies sometimes, but the differences shouldn't be much. But from the GDP data, right, we can see that US economy actually posted very good growth for the last two consecutive quarters. It was reported 1.3% for Q1 2023 and 2.6% growth for Q4 last year. However, the GDI data showed the US economy declined 2.3% for Q1 this year and negative 3.3% for Q4 2022. So the discrepancies were actually huge, right? So if GDP data is real, US economy is still very healthy and growing. If GDI data is real, then US has been in recessions from Q4 last year. So if we take the average, because we don't know which sets of data, got cooked up. So if we take the average of two sets of numbers, it still shows that the economy has been in recession already. The average is still, negative. So really, different departments within the system should compare notes, right, before they release this data to make sure things run on consistent logics and to conserve their purposes better. If there have been a lot of markups in economic data in recent quarters, think about it. You can't fake it forever, right? Decisions will have to be made sometime. Hopefully things can hold till among the central banks this summer. And that's it for this week. Hope it helps.
All right. Thank you, Charlene.
Well, it sounds like number not going to go up, but that's just another day in the life of the bear market.
It's not if I buy it, whatever it is.
Oh boy. All right. Thanks, Charlene.
Yeah, well, we should get Cody's insight on crypto market. Is the pressure is over, right? And so where he sees crypto market is heading.
Oh, don't do that to me. I got no idea. How could anyone have any idea?
Exactly. If you said anything else, I would have lost. I'd have lost respect.
Yeah. I don't pretend to make calls and know what's happening because I don't think anyone really does.
He doesn't want to be the Aladdin Dow Jim Cramer.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't blame you.
Oh dear. What are you seeing anyway, Cody? Anything interesting?
I mean, me not really, honestly, and I'm probably not even the best person to ask at this moment in time. I haven't been, following insanely closely. Again, I think it's still kind of a market where, I mean, if you wanna be closely involved, you can probably find things to do. But I also think you're not going to miss that much if you're just, following the things you're interested in and not miss a few things.
Right. So kind of like in the what you might call like the mature stage of the bear market, or like the the winter stage.
Yeah, maybe.
Where things are less drastic and needing to be followed all the time.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, like I don't think there's necessarily. I mean, obviously all the Binance stuff is kind of crazy, but
concerning.
I don't know. Pretty honestly fatigued with bear market bad news at this point. So it's just like whatever happens. Just gonna kind of ride along.
Yeah. yeah, you're happy with your BNB bags, and you're just gonna,
Yeah.
FTT is gonna make a comeback, baby.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Max Long.
I've got my Luna ready to go for the next
Oh,
for
yeah.
the
I
next
think I still
bull
got some
run.
Lunas in there.
It's still got some legs, I think.
I bought so much like past dollars worth of Luna for like $1 during the crash. It was pretty entertaining.
Yeah,
Just for
it
the
was.
nostalgia.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
entertaining is maybe like a coping word, honestly, but
yeah, it is. But at the same time, like I feel like this is a common, like I've done this in the past, and I feel like this is like a common crypto person thing to do is to buy tokens to commemorate your worst like rugs and crashes.
yeah, sometimes I love like going back on like an old, almost forgotten wallet and just like finding a few things and being like, oh, those are the good days.
Yeah, or like for example, when Iron Finance crashed, I bought 10 million Titan tokens just for 15
Right.
bucks or something. Just to that's
Yeah.
a memento. That's
It's
a
just
memento.
it's just a collector's item, really.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's your
Not a
concert ticket
valuable one,
stub.
Yeah, exactly. For
Exactly. Yeah.
the same idea.
I put those up on the wall.
Oh man.
That's
Okay.
a little wall display with a button on it that changes between your balance of the token and then the USD equivalent, and you just change.
Yeah, right.
You hit the button depending on what you want to see today. You want to see? Oh yeah, 10 million Titan. I'm gonna leave it on that display for a while, and then when you start getting too
Come
high
back.
on your horse, you just push the button.
Oh Lord. Oh boy. Okay. Well, I guess if nobody else has anything, I guess we'll call it a ball game here.
Wrap
Appreciate
it up
everybody jumping
and
on today.
thank everybody for coming out. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yep,
Always
it's
good
a
to have the core Aladdin folks around.
Yeah, like we said, we'll post the booster list for Clever today, so be on the lookout for that on Twitter and double check it.
That's right. Oh, and one thing I realized we kind of missed earlier, but we should just do a quick shout out to that. There are the booster program for FFX. We are tracking people who are posting and talking about FFX in preparation for the first booster round. But that so just be aware that, as we said in the previous weeks, FFX does have a booster program, and we are keeping an eye on sort of on the usual channels to see people talking about it and educating. We've seen a lot of really great content, so be aware we are still tracking that program. It is still coming, and we'll have more information about that in the future.
Yep. So keep an eye out for those things, gang. And as always, you can hit us up on the Discord or DM us or hit us up on Twitter. So
Yep.
we'll talk to you
Thanks,
later.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Brian.
guys. Bye.
Hi guys.